All right, guys, Entangled review. We got quite a few fun things to look at. Let's get started. All right, so we got Paul Saldino talking about raw meat.
Raw meat? Well, it depends on the sourcing, and it depends on the cut of meat. So it's
That's true.
pretty safe to eat raw. Listen, guys, I cook 99% of my meat, but if you wanted to...
Which is why I don't recommend Paul Saldino. He is on the right path of stuff, but cooking all your meat is not a great decision.
Meat raw, you could, but there's always a risk of contamination with anything that's raw. Ground beef.
It being raw has no bearing on the risk of contamination. And you always have to ask, what does contamination actually mean?
Going to have a higher risk of contamination because of all of the surfaces of the meat that are touching the meat grinder. A steak, pretty safe except for the outside. If you wanted to eat your steak really blue rare, you could just sear the outside and eat most of it raw. Why would you want to eat your meat raw? Some people like it to taste better. Some people feel like it digests better. There are some nutrients in meat, like taurine, that have even been associated with longevity that are degraded significantly by heat. So this is why when I cook steaks like this, I'll make sure that they're rare to medium rare. I don't want to overcook my steak. I don't like well done steak. But yeah, eating raw meat, safe. There's always a risk of raw foods, but I'm going to go cook this steak right now because I prefer it cooked.
Well, so there's not a risk of eating raw meat. The only risk is if it's frozen and then it's defrosted and then you eat it raw, because the freezing process that humans do creates this so-called harmful bacteria that is what he's talking about, contamination. And also, it's a big fallacy. It's like, oh, I'm just gonna cook the meat a little bit. Well, if you pasteurize the milk a little bit, it's still pasteurized. And if you cook the meat a little bit, it's still cooked. You're still altering the chemical composition of what's going on in the food. You're still killing the bacteria. You're still killing the enzymes that actually allow you to digest the food in the first place. So yeah, let's go next up. We got soccer players protect your knee with this muscle for knee stability, VMO. Yeah, so this is like one of the classic things in the rehab world for years and years and years about, oh, you got to build up the muscles around the knee that'll fix the knee. Well, this is such a segmented understanding of the human body. That muscle next to your knee, if you try and isolate the muscle, make it stronger, quote unquote, which basically just translates to artificially create hypertrophy in one muscle away from the whole system, then you can go out on the field and maybe like you'll feel a pump in the leg. Maybe you'll feel more secure because you have this mental belief that you just strengthened your knee with all of this isolation work. And that could last for a little bit, but then you have stories like Jack Wilshere at Arsenal when he had his ACL tear. He came back from that looking like he gained 20 pounds of muscle in his lower leg or around the knee, and that didn't stop more injuries. The whole body works as one system. If you isolate anything and strengthen it, you're literally working against how the body works. And the reason that knee is in pain is not because one little muscle next to it is weak. It's because the whole system is not working correctly, and the knee is the fall guy, is the scapegoat. So if you want to train correctly, you have to treat the whole system. All right, so we have Vander start talking about Ajax.
Emphasize on training, more emphasize on strength, on core. So in that way, a couple of things what you mentioned are in a different surroundings now than in the past.
Okay, so it's evolving all the time.
Yeah, but that needs to be, because I retired 9 years ago. But if you see the pace of the game, the speed of the ball, the how far the ball goes away from the feet with the first touch, it looks already that 10 years ago is already a lifetime away compared to. It's recently, 25 years ago, when we won the Champions League with Ajax and the World Cup in Japan, the level of football, it looked like almost, at that time it was spectacular. And now if you look at it, it's Are you playing against? Are you playing a second division type of football? Because football evolves. Players are so much more powerful, more strength, more runs, that kind of thing. So you need to evolve because if you stand still, then it's gone. And I think we anticipated that.
Well, it's an interesting viewpoint, and I'm always kind of against this like blank check bias that times have changed, the game has changed. Like, why has the game changed? Yes, there's bigger stadiums, there's nicer pitches, there's nicer TVs, there's nicer resolution on your monitors. There's better jerseys that are tighter and more trim. All these things that improve the presentation of the game. But at the same time, nowadays, we have way more injuries. We have way more non-contact injuries. We have way more catastrophic injuries than were in his day. And squad sizes are much bigger nowadays than they were before. So yes, the game has changed with much more fragility, with players falling over, with non-contact ligament tears, which is just the most insane thing to ever happen in the history of the human civilization, and yet now it's so-called normal. And yeah, like we can argue that players nowadays are like quote unquote more athletic, but at the same time, we have guys breaking into first team football that are 5 foot tall and they weigh 140 pounds and they're skinny little kids. So like, how does that fall into the whole equation of the game being more powerful and more strength? And at the same time, like we're seeing Ajax right now they're doing really poorly in the Eredivisie, and they're not producing as many top quality players as they did 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. So that's something to consider. All right, next up.
Futbolistas del mundo de pequeños se hicieron futbolistas por el contacto del balón, no por otra cosa. Luego hay muchas cosas importantísimas, pero lo fundamental es que todos se hicieron futbolistas porque un día en la calle, en cualquier sitio, le dieron patadas a un balonista, y creo que tenemos el deber de que esto nunca olvidarlo, porque los jugadores juegan por eso, por esto, y he intentado esto.
That's right. So the players play. The whole reason why players become good at something is because they enjoy it. That passion, that love, that excitement, that effortless flow state that you achieve when you're doing something that you truly enjoy is undisputed. There's nothing else that can beat it, which is why I'm really against cone drills and all these kind of ball mastery things, because truly, do you actually enjoy that, or do you actually enjoy playing the game? The thing that you enjoy most, you'll be best at. So do more of what you enjoy and you'll get better at the sport of football. And Pep's absolutely correct. The guys that play the most football, that have the most contact of the ball, are the ones that become the best. Yeah, in the neighborhood, on the streets. There we go. All right, lastly, here we go.
Speed isn't everything in football, but it sure does help sometimes. The fastest players on your team are in the gym. So why aren't you?
It's pretty funny. Most of these comments are people saying, no, actually it's the opposite. Usually the guy that's not in the gym is the fastest guy, and then the guy in the gym is the one that's injury prone. He's too muscular, he's a bit bulky, he's a bit clumsy with his touch. He's like usually in the middle of the rondos. So it's just like one of the craziest myths on Instagram. It's just people trying to sell their gym courses, saying, "Oh yeah, if you're not fast and you're slow, do these exercises in the gym with these weights, and you'll get faster." Well, the reality is the opposite. You'll get slower, less athletic, and more injury prone because you're reinforcing the incorrect biomechanics. You're reinforcing the incorrect muscular patterns of recruitment. When you're in the gym doing weightlifting, you are going towards the end of the spectrum of being muscle driven, which is the opposite of being fascial driven, which is what every top athlete is at the highest level. All right, guys, that's enough of this nonsense from Instagram. This is Football Entangled review. Enjoy. Drop some comments down below on what you thought, on what your thoughts on these posts are, and we'll talk about it. And then I'll see you guys very soon for the next video.